The collective had ruled the sector for more than 3,000 cycles. Their ships were made of living crystal that grew and healed itself. Their weapons could melt moons. Their empire stretched across 400 star systems, and no species had ever challenged them successfully. They believed they were the most powerful civilization in the known galaxy, and for a very long time they were right. High Commander stood on the observation deck of his flagship, the Eternal Ascendance. He was tall and thin, like all with pale blue skin, and 4 glowing eyes that could see in spectrums other species could not imagine. Behind him, 17 warships of the 17th Fleet held formation. They were patrolling the outer edges of collective space, looking for pirates and smugglers and any other threats to authority. It was supposed to be a quiet patrol. Nothing ever happened in this region of space. The nearest civilized systems were dozens of light years away, and no species had been foolish enough to challenge the collective in over 500 cycles. Then the sensors detected something strange. Lieutenant was the first to notice the anomaly. He was young for an officer with only 200 cycles of service. His 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the readings on his crystal display screen. At first, he thought the equipment was malfunctioning. The data made no sense at all. "High Commander," said slowly, "I am detecting an unknown vessel at the edge of sensor range." Turned away from the viewport. He was not concerned. Unknown vessels appeared from time to time. Usually they belonged to primitive species attempting their first steps into interstellar space. Such encounters were routine. They would scan the vessel and determine if the species was worth conquering or simply ignoring. "What can you tell me about it?" asked. Hesitated. "The readings are very unusual, sir. The vessel appears to be constructed primarily of metal alloys, iron, steel, titanium, materials we stopped using for shipbuilding thousands of cycles ago." A few officers on the command deck laughed quietly. Metal ships were relics of ancient history. Every advanced civilization knew that crystal and organic composites were far superior for space travel. Metal was heavy and inflexible and primitive. "How amusing," said with a thin smile. "A species that builds ships from rocks and dirt. Continue scanning. I want to know everything about these creatures." Worked his controls, but his confusion only deepened. The scanning beams were having difficulty penetrating the unknown vessel's hull. This should have been impossible. Sensors could see through almost anything. They could map the interior of planets. They could detect life signs from thousands of kilometers away. Yet this crude metal ship was somehow resistant to their most advanced technology. "Sir, I am having trouble getting clear readings," admitted. "The hull composition is interfering with our scans. What I can determine is that the vessel is approximately 800 meters in length. It appears to be heavily armored, and it seems to be carrying a significant number of weapon systems." Raised one of his thin eyebrows. "Weapons? What kind of weapons?" "I cannot be certain, sir, but there appear to be dozens of large projectile launchers along the hull, possibly hundreds of smaller defensive systems, and what might be missile tubes. Many missile tubes." Another officer named looked up from her station. She was the communications specialist for the Eternal Ascendance. "High Commander, the unknown vessel is broadcasting an identification signal. They call themselves humans. Their ship is designated USS Resolute." "Humans," repeated the word slowly. He had never heard of this species. They were not in any collective database. "Open a channel. Let us welcome these humans to civilized space." The main flickered, and then displayed an image that made several officers gasp in surprise. The creature on screen was unlike anything they had encountered before. It had soft pink skin and only 2 small eyes positioned on the front of its round head. A patch of brown fur grew on top of its skull. It was wearing some kind of gray uniform with colored patches on the shoulders. The creature smiled, showing flat white teeth. "This is Captain Daniel Hayes of the United Earth Coalition vessel Resolute. We come in peace, and we are hopping to establish diplomatic relations with any civilizations we encounter." Studied the human carefully. The creature looked so fragile, so weak. The commander had conquered species that appeared far more threatening than this soft, fleshy being. He could not imagine how such creatures had survived long enough to develop space travel. "Greetings, Captain Hayes," replied in a tone that carried barely concealed contempt. "I am High Commander of the Collective. You have entered space that belongs to us. All vessels passing through this region must submit to inspection and registration." On the screen, the human captain nodded slowly. His smile remained in place, but something changed in his eyes. "I appreciate the welcome, High Commander. However, the Resolute is a sovereign vessel of Earth. We do not submit to inspection by foreign powers." Checked her translation matrix. She wanted to make sure she had understood the human correctly. No species spoke to this way. The Collective had destroyed entire civilizations for lesser insults. Leaned forward in his command chair. "I do not think you understand your situation, human. You are one ship. I command 17 warships, the most advanced warships in this sector of the galaxy. Your primitive metal vessel may seem impressive to your young species, but I assure you it cannot survive combat against us." Captain Hayes did not appear frightened. He did not appear worried at all. He simply looked at with those strange two eyes and spoke in a calm, steady voice. "High Commander, I strongly advise you to reconsider your approach. We came here looking for friends. We came here hopping to trade and learn and grow together with other species. But I need you to understand something very important about humanity." He paused and felt something strange. It was a feeling he had not experienced in centuries. It took him a moment to recognize it as uncertainty. "We do not surrender," Captain Hayes continued. "Not to anyone, not ever. That is not a boast or a threat. It is simply who we are. So please let us talk as equals. Let us find a way to be friends, because the alternative benefits no one." Sat back in his chair and looked at the human captain on his. He saw a creature made of soft flesh with no claws and no armor and no natural weapons of any kind. He saw a ship made of crude metal with none of the elegance of crystal technology. And for reasons he could not explain, a small voice in the back of his mind told him to listen to the human, to accept the offer of friendship and let this strange ship continue on its way. But had not conquered half a sector by listening to small voices. He had built his reputation on strength and dominance and absolute authority. He could not allow a single primitive vessel to defy him, not with his entire fleet watching, not with his officers recording everything for collective archives. "Prepare a boarding party," commanded. "We will inspect this vessel whether its captain agrees or not, and if the humans resist, they will learn what happens to species that challenge the collective." The order was given, the fleet began to move, and the galaxy would never be the same again. What High Commander did not understand was that humanity had spent its entire existence preparing for this moment. Not deliberately, not consciously, but through 10,000 years of bloody history, the human species had become something unique in the galaxy. They had become survivors. On Earth, humans had faced extinction dozens of times. Ice ages had frozen their world, plagues had killed millions, asteroids had struck their planet, volcanoes had darkened their skies, and through every catastrophe humanity had refused to die. They adapted, they learned, they grew stronger. But the greatest threat humans ever faced was themselves. Captain Daniel Hayes sat in his command chair aboard the USS Resolute and watched the fleet begin to move toward his ship. He was 47 years old with short gray hair and blue eyes that had seen too many battles. Before becoming a starship captain, he had served in 3 wars on Earth. He had commanded soldiers in deserts and mountains and frozen wastelands. He knew what conflict looked like, and he recognized it now in the movement of those alien vessels. "They are closing formation, sir," reported Commander. She was his executive officer and had served with him for 6 years. She was a small woman with red hair and a sharp mind. 17 ships forming an encirclement pattern. Classic intimidation tactic. Hayes nodded slowly. They think they are the predators here. At his weapons station, Lieutenant Commander Tucker was running final checks on all combat systems. Tucker was a big man with dark skin and hands that could crush metal, but gentle enough to repair the most delicate circuitry. He had been the top weapons officer in the fleet before requesting transfer to the Resolute. "All batteries are charged and ready, Captain," Tucker reported. "Point defense grid is active. Missile tubes are loaded. We are ready for whatever they want to try." Hayes turned to look at his communications officer Price. She was the youngest member of the bridge crew at only 26 years old. Her hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her fingers moved across her console with practiced speed. "Any response to our last transmission?" Hayes asked. "Negative, sir. They have gone silent, but I am picking up a lot of internal communications between their ships. I cannot translate most of it, but the tone seems aggressive." Hayes had expected this. He had studied every first contact scenario in human history, and he knew that some species only understood strength. They had ruled this sector for thousands of years through military dominance. They did not know how to deal with a species that refused to kneel. The Resolute was not like any ship the galaxy had ever seen. It was a dreadnought-class battleship designed and built by a species that had perfected the art of war. Every system on board had been created with one purpose in mind: survival. The hull was made of layered composite armor that combined the strength of hardened steel with the flexibility of advanced polymers. It could withstand direct nuclear strikes. The outer layer was coated with materials that absorbed and dispersed energy weapons. The inner layers were designed to contain damage and prevent hull breaches from spreading. The weapons were even more impressive. The main armament consisted of 12 magnetic batteries capable of accelerating tungsten projectiles to 17% of light speed. At that velocity, a single slug carried more kinetic energy than a small nuclear weapon. The projectiles were so fast that no known defensive system could track and intercept them. Backing up, there were 48 missile tubes loaded with a variety of warheads. Some carried nuclear payloads. Others were designed to release clouds of shrapnel that would shred enemy vessels. A few contained electromagnetic pulse generators that could disable ships without destroying them. The point defense system was perhaps the most sophisticated technology on the ship. Thousands of small kinetic interceptors were linked to a targeting computer that could track 10,000 objects simultaneously. Any incoming fire would be detected, analyzed, and destroyed before it could reach the hull. All of this had been built because humanity expected the worst. When humans finally developed faster than light travel, they did not send explorers into space. They sent warships. They sent the most powerful weapons they had ever created, because humans knew from bitter experience that the universe was not kind to the weak. Commander stepped closer to the captain's chair and spoke quietly so only Hayes could hear. "Sir, we have 17 alien warships closing on our position. We are alone with no backup and no reinforcements available. What is our plan?" Hayes looked at her with calm, steady eyes. "We both know what those ships are going to do. They are going to demand our surrender again. When we refuse, they are going to open fire. They think their numbers and their technology will overwhelm us." "And when they are wrong?" asked. "Then we show them exactly what humanity is capable of. We show them why they should have accepted our offer of friendship." On the Eternal Ascendance, High Commander watched the human vessel with growing irritation. The ship had not moved. It had not attempted to flee or maneuver or do anything at all. It simply hung in space like a piece of debris waiting to be cleared away. Lieutenant continued his scans, but the results were troubling. The more data he gathered, the more concerned he became. The human ship was carrying far more weapons than any vessel its size should be able to hold. The armor plating was thicker than anything in records. and there were power signatures coming from inside the hull that he could not identify at all. "High Commander," said carefully, "I recommend caution. This vessel may be more capable than it appears." Dismissed the concern with a wave of his thin blue hand. Every primitive species arms itself heavily. It is a sign of their fear. They know they cannot match our technology, so they pile weapons upon weapons, hoping that quantity will overcome quality. It never does. Looked up from her communication station. "Sir, the human captain is transmitting again." "Put him on screen." Captain Hayes appeared once more. His expression had changed. The polite smile was gone. In its place was something harder, something that the universal translator struggled to interpret. The closest approximation was quiet determination mixed with what might have been sadness. "High Commander," Hayes said slowly, "I am asking you one final time to stand down your forces. We do not want conflict. We did not come here looking for enemies. But if you attack this ship, you will regret it. Your entire fleet will regret it. I am not making a threat. I am giving you a warning from one commander to another." Laughed. The sound was sharp and cold. "You warn me. One small ship warns 17 warships. Human, your courage is admirable, but your judgment is flawed. You have no idea what you are facing." Hayes nodded slowly. His blue eyes never left the screen. "You are right about one thing, High Commander. I am alone out here. One ship against 17. Remember that. Remember that you had every advantage. Remember that I tried to warn you, because I want you to understand that what happens next is not our choice. It is yours." The transmission ended, stared at the blank screen for a long moment. Then he turned to his weapons officer and gave the order that would change everything. All ships opened fire. First weapons lit up the darkness of space like artificial stars. 3 crystalline destroyers at the front of the formation unleashed concentrated plasma beams that burned at temperatures hotter than the surface of most suns. The beams were beautiful in a terrible way. They glowed bright blue and white as they crossed the void at nearly the speed of light. They struck the Resolute's hull with enough energy to melt through solid rock. And nothing happened. On the Eternal Ascendance, the weapons officer stared at his display screen in disbelief. Direct hits confirmed, High Commander. All 3 beams struck the target vessel. "And demanded." "No damage detected, sir. The beams appear to have dissipated across the hull surface. The human ship is completely undamaged." This was impossible. Plasma weapons could cut through warships like sunlight through fog. They had melted asteroids with those beams. They had burned through the hulls of enemy vessels in seconds. No known material could withstand concentrated plasma fire. But the human ship could. Captain Hayes felt the vibration through his command chair as the enemy weapon struck his ship. The hull temperature sensors showed a brief spike, but the thermal dissipation layer absorbed the energy and radiated it harmlessly into space. The Resolute's designers had anticipated energy weapons. They had built the ship to survive them. "Damage report," Hayes said calmly. Commander checked her displays. "Hull temperature increased by 12 degrees and is already cooling. No structural damage. Armor integrity at 100%. Hayes nodded. He had hoped it would not come to this. He had genuinely wanted peaceful contact with this alien species. But they had made their choice, and now he would show them the consequences. "Tucker," Hayes said quietly, "you may return fire." Lieutenant Commander Tucker had been waiting for those words. His hands moved across his weapons console with the precision of a surgeon and the eagerness of a predator. He had spent his entire career training for moments like this. Every simulation, every exercise, every drill had prepared him to do exactly what he was about to do. "Targeting lead destroyer," Tucker announced. "Battery 1 firing." The sound that filled the Resolute was unlike anything they had ever heard. It was a deep, electromagnetic hum, followed by a sharp crack, as the magnetic accelerators hurled a tungsten slug out of the ship at 17% of light speed. The projectile was only 2 meters long and half a meter wide, but it carried enough kinetic energy to level a city. The destroyer never saw it coming. The projectile crossed the distance between the ships in less than a second. It struck the crystalline hull and kept going. The destroyer did not explode in the traditional sense. It simply came apart. The kinetic energy transferred through the ship's structure faster than the material could handle. One moment there was a beautiful crystalline warship crewed by 300 officers. The next moment there was an expanding cloud of superheated debris and glowing crystal fragments. Watched his tactical display and felt his blood turn cold. The destroyer had been there, and then it was not. His sensors had barely registered the incoming projectile. It had moved too fast for the tracking systems to follow. "High Commander," he said in a voice that trembled slightly, "the Radiant Dawn has been destroyed. Total loss. No survivors detected." Before could respond, Tucker fired again, and again, and again. The second slug struck another destroyer amidships and tore it in half. The third hit a light cruiser and punched straight through from bow to stern, leaving a tunnel of destruction in its wake. The fourth caught a frigate that was attempting to turn away and reduced it to spinning wreckage. 4 ships destroyed in less than 10 seconds. The fleet had not even completed their first firing cycle. Stood frozen at his command post. His 4 luminescent eyes were wide with an emotion he had not felt since he was a child. It was fear, pure primal fear, the kind that gripped the heart and refused to let go. "All ships concentrate fire on the human vessel," he ordered. His voice cracked slightly. "Everything we have now." The remaining 13 warships obeyed. They unleashed every weapon they possessed. Plasma beams lanced through space. Graviton torpedoes spiraled toward the target. Disruptor pulses designed to overload enemy power systems flashed across the void. It was more firepower than they had used in any single engagement for over a century. The Resolute's point defense grid came alive. Thousands of small interceptors launched from ports along the hull. Each one was guided by a targeting computer that could track and predict the path of incoming fire with perfect accuracy. The interceptors raced outward and began destroying everything in their path. Torpedoes vanished in bright flashes. Disruptor pulses were absorbed by sacrificial drones. The plasma beams struck the hull and did nothing just like before. Not a single weapon reached anything vital. On the bridge of the Resolute commander watched the defensive display with professional satisfaction. Point defense performance at 98%, Captain. All incoming fire neutralized. Hayes did not smile. He took no pleasure in what was happening. These aliens had attacked his ship and threatened his crew. They had left him no choice, but watching their vessels die brought him no joy. Each destroyed ship meant hundreds of lives ended, families that would never see their loved ones again, children who would grow up without parents. War was always ugly. Hayes had learned that lesson long ago on the battlefields of Earth. "Tucker," he said quietly, "continue firing. Priority targets are weapons, platforms, and engines. If any ship attempts to flee, let them go." Tucker nodded and kept working his console. The fired in steady sequence now. Each shot found its target. Each target ceased to exist. On the Eternal Ascendance, chaos had consumed the command deck. Officers screamed reports that no one wanted to hear. Ship after ship was disappearing from the tactical display. They had never experienced anything like this. They had conquered dozens of species. They had fought hundreds of battles. They had always won. Until now. Gripped her console as the flagship shuddered from a near miss. "High Commander, we have lost 11 ships. Only 5 remain, including this vessel. The enemy ship is completely undamaged." Could not speak. He could not think. Everything he knew about warfare, everything he believed about superiority was crumbling before his eyes. A single primitive vessel was destroying his entire fleet. A ship made of metal and crewed by soft, fleshy creatures with only 2 eyes. "Retreat," he finally managed to say. "All ships retreat." But it was too late for 3 more vessels. The slugs found them before they could engage their faster-than-light drives. They died like all the others, quickly, completely, without any chance to fight back. The battle lasted exactly 7 minutes and 43 seconds. When it ended, 15 warships had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris and cooling metal. The crystalline hulls that had once represented the pinnacle of galactic technology were now nothing but glittering fragments drifting through the void. Thousands of officers had died. An entire fleet had been erased from existence. And the ship that had done it all hung motionless in space, without a single scratch on its hull. High Commander stood on the observation deck of the Eternal Ascendants and stared at the wreckage of his command. Emergency lighting cast everything in a dim red glow. The main power systems had failed when a round had passed within 50 meters of the flagship. The near miss had overloaded half the ship's circuits. Engines were offline. Weapons were dead. Life support was running on backup power only. Damage assessment said. His voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. Lieutenant checked his portable data device. The main consoles were no longer functioning. Severe damage to primary and secondary power cores. Engine capability reduced to 0. Weapons systems completely offline. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Casualty reports are still coming in, but early estimates suggest 30% of the crew are dead or wounded. 30%, nearly 1,000 officers on the ship alone, and the flagship was the lucky one. It had survived. The damaged cruiser Starlight Vigil floated nearby. Its crystalline hull was cracked in a dozen places. Atmosphere vented from multiple breaches. Escape pods had launched, but most were damaged. Rescue operations would take hours, and many would not survive that long. Approached the High Commander carefully. "Sir, the human vessel is hailing us." Closed his 4 eyes for a long moment. He did not want to see that human face again. He did not want to hear that calm, steady voice. But he had no choice. His ship was helpless. His fleet was gone. If the humans wanted to finish the job, there was nothing he could do to stop them. "Put it through," he said quietly. The portable display screen flickered to life and Captain Daniel Hayes appeared. He looked exactly the same as before. His gray hair was still perfectly in place. His blue eyes were still calm and focused. There was no triumph in his expression, no celebration of victory. He looked like a man who had done something terrible but necessary. "High Commander," Hayes said, "this battle is over. Your remaining ships are no longer combat capable. We have no wish to cause further casualties." Felt anger rising in his chest. It was easier than the shame and fear that threatened to overwhelm him. "You have destroyed my fleet, killed thousands of my officers, and now you speak of mercy." "I speak of reality," Hayes replied. "You attacked us. We defended ourselves. Your people died because you refused to listen when I warned you what would happen. That blood is on your hands, High Commander, not mine." The words struck like physical blows. He wanted to argue. He wanted to rage against this soft creature who had humiliated him so completely. But deep down he knew the human was right. Hayes had tried to avoid this battle. He had offered peace. He had warned of consequences, and had ignored every opportunity to prevent this disaster. "What do you want?" asked finally. Hayes leaned back slightly in his command chair. "I want the same thing I wanted at the beginning of this encounter: peace, friendship, cooperation between our species. Nothing that has happened today changes that goal." Looked up from his data device with surprise on his face. Stopped working her console and stared at the screen. Even the wounded officers on the command deck turned to watch. None of them could believe what they were hearing. The humans had won. They had achieved total victory. They could destroy the remaining ships at any moment. They could demand surrender and subjugation. They could take prisoners or demand tribute or do any of the things that victorious species did. Instead, they were offering friendship. "You cannot be serious," said slowly. After everything that has happened here today, you still wish to be allies." Hayes nodded. "High Commander, let me explain something about humanity. We did not come to the stars looking for enemies. We have plenty of those already. We spent 10,000 years fighting ourselves before we ever left Earth. Wars over territory and resources and religion and ideology. We killed millions of our own people in conflicts that accomplished nothing. We built weapons capable of destroying our entire planet. We came very close to extinction more than once." He paused and his expression grew thoughtful. "When we finally achieved unity and reached for the stars, we made a promise to ourselves. We would not repeat the mistakes of our past. We would seek cooperation instead of conquest. We would offer friendship before raising weapons. We would give every species we encountered the chance to be our ally." "But you built warships," pointed out. "Your vessel is the most powerful weapon I have ever encountered." "Yes, because we also learned another lesson from our history. Peace requires strength. Those who cannot defend themselves will always be victimized by those who can. We built our warships not because we wanted war, but because we wanted to ensure that war would never be forced upon us." Considered these words carefully. The philosophy was strange to him. They had always believed that strength existed to be used. Power was meant to dominate. The strong ruled and the weak served. That was the natural order of things. But these humans had all the power. They had proven beyond any doubt that they could destroy the whenever they wished, and yet they still offered friendship. "I do not understand your species," admitted. For the first time since the battle began, Captain Hayes smiled. It was a small expression but genuine. "That is perfectly fine, High Commander. Understanding takes time. All we ask is that you give us that time. Let us talk. Let us learn about each other. Let us find ways to cooperate that benefit both our peoples." Commander spoke quietly from her station. "Captain, we are detecting multiple vessels entering the sector at long range. Reinforcements, at least 40 ships." Hayes glanced at his executive officer, then back at the screen. "It appears your people are coming to investigate, High Commander. What will you tell them about what happened here?" This was the question that had been dreading. He would have to explain how a single primitive vessel had destroyed 15 warships in minutes. He would have to admit that the collective had encountered a species they could not conquer. His career was over. His reputation was destroyed. He might even face execution for such a catastrophic failure. Unless he chose a different path. "I will tell them the truth," said slowly. The words felt strange in his mouth. "I will tell them that we attacked a peaceful vessel and paid the price for our arrogance. I will tell them that the humans are not our enemies unless we choose to make them so. And I will recommend that the collective accept their offer of friendship." Hayes nodded with what appeared to be respect. "That is a brave choice, High Commander. I hope your leaders will listen." Hoped so too, because he had seen what happened when the humans were provoked, and he never wanted to see it again. The reinforcement fleet arrived 3 hours after the battle ended. 42 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and found themselves surrounded by the wreckage of the 17th Fleet. Crystal fragments glittered in the starlight. Debris fields stretched for thousands of kilometers. Emergency beacons from escape pods created a chorus of distress signals that overwhelmed the communication channels. Supreme Admiral commanded the rescue fleet from the bridge of the Celestial Dominion. She was old with nearly 800 cycles of experience. She had fought in the wars and the subjugation of the systems. She had never seen destruction on this scale. "Report," she demanded. Her tactical officer looked pale. "Admiral, we are detecting the wreckage of 15 warships. The Eternal Ascendants and the Starlight Vigil are heavily damaged but intact. All other vessels of the 17th Fleet have been destroyed." "Destroyed by what?" The officer hesitated. "By a single vessel, Admiral. It remains in the area, approximately 800 meters in length, constructed of metal alloys. The ship is designated USS Resolute and belongs to a species called humans." turned to look at the viewport. She could see the human ship in the distance. It was ugly by standards, blocky and angular and covered in what appeared to be weapons, nothing like the elegant crystalline vessels of the collective. And yet this ugly ship had done what no other species had ever accomplished. It had broken a fleet. High Commander is transmitting from the Eternal Ascendants, the communications officer announced. He wishes to speak with you privately, Admiral. Nodded and moved to her private chamber. The transmission connected and she saw his face on the screen. He looked like a different person than the confident commander she had known for centuries. His eyes were dull. His skin had lost its glow. He carried himself like someone who had witnessed something that shattered his understanding of reality. "Tell me everything," said simply. Told her. He described the initial contact and the human captain's offer of peace. He explained how he had dismissed the warning and ordered his ships to attack. He recounted the battle in painful detail. The weapons that moved too fast to see. The armor that shrugged off everything that could throw at it. The systematic destruction of ship after ship until nothing remained but wreckage and silence. When he finished was quiet for a long time. She had commanded fleets for 500 cycles. She had developed tactics that crushed entire civilizations, and she had no idea how to fight what it described. The human captain offered friendship after winning, she asked finally. Yes, Admiral. He said that humanity did not come to the stars seeking enemies. He wants peace and cooperation. He let my ship survive even though he could have destroyed us easily. Considered this carefully. In her experience, victorious species did not show mercy. They took what they could and destroyed what remained. That was how the galaxy worked. That was how they themselves had built their empire. But these humans followed different rules. What do you recommend? Asked. Looked directly at the screen. I recommend that we accept their offer, Admiral. I recommend that we do not provoke them further, because if we go to war with this species, I believe we will lose. Not eventually, immediately, completely. They will destroy us like I watched them destroy my fleet. Had never heard a commander speak this way. Had been one of the most aggressive officers in the collective. He had advocated for expansion and conquest his entire career. For him to recommend peace meant that he had truly been broken by what he witnessed. Or perhaps he had simply been wise enough to learn from it. I will speak with the human captain myself, decided. Stand by. She returned to the bridge and ordered a communication channel open to the Resolute. Captain Hayes appeared on the main. He looked exactly as had described. Soft and fragile and completely unthreatening. Had to remind herself that this creature had just destroyed 15 warships without taking a single casualty. Captain Hayes said carefully, I am Supreme Admiral of the Collective. I have been informed of the events that occurred here today. Hayes nodded. His expression was respectful but unafraid. Admiral, I regret that our first contact has been marked by violence. That was not our intention. High Commander tells me that you still wish for peace between our species. I do. Humanity has spent too many centuries at war. We have seen the cost of conflict. We have buried too many of our own people in graves that should never have been dug. When we reached the stars, we hoped to find something better. Friends instead of enemies, partners instead of victims. Studied the human carefully. She was trying to understand how such a small, soft creature could be so dangerous. Where did their strength come from? How had they developed such devastating weapons? What kind of species could build instruments of destruction while genuinely preferring peace? Why should I believe you? Asked. Your ship carries enough firepower to threaten our. How do I know this offer of friendship is not simply a tactic to lower our defenses? Hayes smiled slightly. Admiral, if we wanted to conquer your people, we would not have started by destroying only the ships that attacked us. We would have followed your reinforcement fleet here. We would have struck while you were still confused and disorganized. The fact that I am talking to you instead of firing on you should tell you everything you need to know about our intentions. The logic was undeniable. The humans could have continued their attack. They could have crippled the rescue fleet while it was focused on saving survivors. Instead, they had waited. They had allowed to arrive and assess the situation. They had given her time to make a rational decision. This was not the behavior of conquerors. This was the behavior of people who genuinely wanted peace. "Very well, Captain Hayes," said slowly. "I will recommend to the High Council that we accept your offer of diplomatic relations, but I must ask you something first." "Ask." "What are you? Where did your species come from? How did you develop weapons that can destroy warships so easily?" Hayes considered the question for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight of history that could barely comprehend. "We are human, Admiral. We came from a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star. For 10,000 years we fought each other with every weapon we could imagine, swords and spears and guns and bombs. We split the atom and learned to harness its power for destruction. We built machines that could think and weapons that could end all life on our world. We survived ice and fire and plague and our own worst impulses." He paused, and his blue eyes seemed to look through the screen into some distant memory. "We developed these weapons because we had to. Because our history taught us that the universe is dangerous and the only way to survive is to be more dangerous. We hoped we would never have to use them. We hoped the galaxy would welcome us as friends. Today proved that hope was naive. But it does not change our goals. We will keep offering friendship to every species we encounter, and we will keep destroying anyone who mistakes that offer for weakness." Understood now. The humans were not conquerors because they did not need to be. They were already the most dangerous species in the galaxy. They had nothing to prove and nothing to fear. They could afford to be peaceful because no one could threaten them. "I will deliver your message to the High Council," said, "and I will add my personal recommendation that we never give the humans a reason to demonstrate their weapons again." Hayes nodded. "That would be wise, Admiral. We really do want to be your friends, but we will be your enemies if you force us, and I promise you that is not something your people will survive." The transmission ended. Stood on her bridge surrounded by the wreckage of pride and assumptions about their place in the galaxy. She gave orders to begin rescue operations and to collect the dead. Then she composed a message to the High Council. It contained only 4 words, the same 4 words that had used, the same 4 words that would become the official collective policy regarding humanity for the next 1,000 years. "Do not provoke them." And the galaxy was never quite the same again. Only the eternal ascendants and one badly damaged cruiser remained, and the human ship was not finished yet.